it really feels like the web is the future. Building applications isn't so much about desktop apps these days, it's more about building deep impact. It's really important because it's the basis of a lot of our web services, and helps us like make sure that they run stably and can scale horizontally and do nice things like surviving DOS attacks.
Recording.
Sure,
You
yeah,
know.
sounds good.
Anyway, how you doing?
Yeah, pretty well, pretty well. I mean,
Yeah.
it's we had our first snow here a few days ago, and it's absolutely beautiful.
I don't know many people that would say the same in most other places. This is a very unique perspective you have. Absolutely beautiful snow.
Yeah, it's.
Are
I
you
mean, it's
more
great.
are you more of a winter sports person or um more of a summer person?
I think definitely summer. I love the cold. I love the snow, but I don't know how to
Yeah,
ski or snowboard or skate. I really don't know any
really.
winter
You just
sports.
you just you're just one of those unique people that like the temperature.
Yeah, I think it's super nice. Like especially when you go from the outside to the inside, and it's really cozy. That's the
Oh,
best part.
okay.
But yeah.
Isn't there like a word? I'm not sure what country, but it's just a word. It's a word for like just that, like that perfect level of comfort. There's some country that has like this
Yeah.
word. I
It could
think
be
it's
like
like
some Scandinavian one. Like they always have
yeah, yeah. They always have some, of some. I don't know. It's just a very. I found it out like a few years ago. I was like, oh, that's there is no word like that for. There is no word like that in the English language, right?
yeah.
So so all these
Is it
languages all have like something that isn't present. Like someone who has like who can speak multiple languages is always like, oh, I don't know how to say it in English, but it's like it doesn't actually exist in English. I always misunderstood
yeah.
that. You know,
Is English your native language, or do you
uh,
speak anything else?
I speak other languages, but English is what I usually focus on. Or I've been
Okay.
speaking English since I was a kid. You know,
Okay, okay, yeah, gotcha,
yeah, yeah,
gotcha. I mean, I find it's always different, the perspectives people have if you grow up with another language and then
right,
pick up English down the line versus people who
yeah,
grew up with English. Because I mean, it's I grew up with English. I speak another language too, but I know my ability to explain the logic behind English is non-existent. It's just, oh yeah, it just makes sense because that's all you've ever spoken your entire life,
yeah,
right?
yeah, 100%. Like the way our vowels work.
Yeah,
When the a and an in front of vowels versus if there's an h, and then only if if the h is silent, then it doesn't count. So you use an, and it's just like I can understand how people are like, you know what, I'm just gonna speak a broken version of this.
yeah, yeah.
You know?
I think it's fair. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about just being understood. Like that's all language is. You're communicating to someone else, and if they understand you
Yeah.
and you understand them, you're good.
And if that doesn't work, just hand gesture your way into an understanding. You know?
Exactly, exactly.
Well, thank you for coming on and taking your
Thanks for
time.
having me.
What time is it over there right now?
It's just after 2 in the afternoon.
2 in the afternoon? And if I got it right, you're in Switzerland right now, right?
Yep, right near Zurich, and think what for North American standards is a small town called Winterthur, but here it's the sixth
uh,
largest city in the country, which I guess would be the equivalent of something like Kitchener in Canada. I
yeah.
don't know.
Do you know the size? Is that too much? Is that too much to ask? How big the kind
I think it's like
of? It's just enough.
115,000, 110 or something. It's not a lot of people. Even Zurich
Okay.
is like 400,000 or 500,000.
All right. Well, it's enough for a soccer game. So
Hey.
that kind of works. you know.
No,
Well, yeah, but yeah, thanks for coming on, and I'm really excited to have you on. Actually, uh, I do want to start from the beginning a little bit. So, as I just to introduce you to the people who are listening, this is Nick, and I got introduced to him from a friend of mine, Dimitri, and he is doing a lot of things which we'll discuss today. And but first and foremost, I do want to talk about your interest in closure and why you decided to, get into that language.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I think it goes back to some point when I was in university. I was studying business at the time, and I wasn't particularly happy with my choice of studies. I mean, in hindsight, I'm glad I took it, but at the time, I wasn't really sure that it would lead me to a job I like. So I started tinkering a bit with programming.
Right,
And first, I went into the realm of Java. This is a language that I learned a bit in high school and I had some familiarity with. Like, I saw you could make cool desktop applications, and that led me to a few small contract gigs where, for like small businesses, I would make simple desktop apps to automate their workflows in storefronts and things like that. Nothing really fancy, but it was kind of like the introduction that got me into programming it in like a more serious way. And
right,
at some point, I think it was yeah over 10 years ago at this point. But thought, okay, it really feels like the web is the future. Building applications isn't so much about desktop apps these days. It's more about building things that people can access from their phones that they can access from anywhere.
right,
And I really didn't like JavaScript, so just started looking around. Okay, what's something that has that like can run both on the client and on the back end, like both front and back end. And there's many options for that, of course. But the thing that I think
now there is
attracted me to
anyway.
Clojure, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
especially nowadays, I think there's a ton. But
yeah,
even back
yeah,
then, I think you could even do it. Anyways, there was a bunch of stuff, but Closure was the one that I found in this one Red Monk post in oh no, maybe that came afterwards. But anyways, I remember reading something about like expressive languages, languages that you can do a lot with little code, and that was super appealing to me because the thing that I started getting annoyed with in Java was like I kept repeating myself. I kept writing the same boilerplate, and I knew there was an easier way to do this with less mental overhead. I just didn't know how because I just am like a junior at that point.
right,
Uh, so then that led me into Clojure. I think it was the combination of the two. I wanted an expressive language and I wanted to write web applications.
right,
Um, and then after just, I think it was a lot of bashing my head against the wall because especially back then there weren't a lot of resources available to you. There were some quite good ones, but not the depth that we have nowadays in the
right,
Clojure community. Um, and that eventually led me to introduce it to the company that I was working at the time, and it just grew from there.
right. And so, and that's how long did it take you to learn it that better way? Because a lot of people, they get nervous about getting into programming, and then they stop at some point. But I feel like if you just keep going, you can get to a level that you're happy with. So, long did it take you to get there?
To get to a point that I was happy with, I think probably took
Yeah,
a ton of time.
right,
There's definitely a combination of feelings of you're not good enough, or I'm not qualified for this. I haven't taken a formal education in computer science. So I mean, those doubts are always there. But the one piece of advice I give anyone that's trying to learn coding is to have some sort of project, something that you want to build. And when you do that, you can even if it's terrible, even if the code that you write is total garbage, and a few years back you look at it and you're like, what did I do here? As long as you have some motivation to build whatever it is, you're going to find a way to make that happen. And I know for me, I around those years I really was interested in uh, tennis and specifically betting on tennis matches.
okay,
Um, I don't know which came first, but either way, it got me really into, like, the
So,
math behind it
which
and,
came
like,
first, the tennis or
learning.
the betting? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I genuinely don't remember if it was, like, I started, because now I follow tennis, almost religiously, but I don't know back then if
Right.
I did. I think it's,
Oh,
like,
I
one
see.
kind of fed off of the other,
Okay.
it's but that for me was, like, this project that just kept going, in the back of my mind and was the thing that drove me to learn more first in Java. I learned how to scrape websites, how to use, Postgres, SQL databases, like, all these things kind of built on each other that I would later use. But that one project was the one that really kickstarted, my, like, experience with programming and pushed almost everything else afterwards. So
Cool.
having a project, I think, is really the key. But how long did
Yeah.
it take me? I don't know. I would say it was years before I felt confident in my
Right.
abilities.
How long did that project take you? The tennis betting project?
Oh, that was like an ongoing thing. But I spent I think when it's maybe my second year or third year of undergrad, yeah, probably second. I didn't have a summer job, so I spent all summer like fully focused
Just
on that.
working on it.
Um,
Wow.
and that got pretty good for a while, and for a while it was making some money. I didn't really put much into it. It was more for the fun of it. At some point it started decreasing. My guess is that like probably algorithms also got better at the same time, and they were doing a
Yeah.
better job of earning money for the bookies than my system could keep up. But so it took me about a summer to like make something that kind of worked, and then I kept refining it over the years. So like I built ones later. When I started learning Clojure, it was a way for me to learn in a new language with something that I was already kind of familiar with and excited
Right.
about, even though I
Right.
didn't really think it would go anywhere at that point. It was more just for learning and interest.
So you always had it such that whatever you were building had some monetary return on it, or that just happened to be the first thing you wanted to do, and then you just did it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. Like I recognize there's this association with betting, and you're looking to like get something, some money out of it, but that wasn't so much the aim for me. It was
Right.
I don't know, maybe I saw a movie or something like excited me at that time about like, oh, sports betting. That's super cool. Uh,
Right.
it was more how do I deal with these probabilities? How do I implement this in code? And then things just kind of cascade after that. Like, oh, you can scrape websites. That's super cool. I can get data off of different things. So the monetary part really wasn't important. I don't think I made much money off of it at all.
Fair
So it
enough.
really wasn't the goal. Um,
Okay.
and then definitely the things that I've done on the side, or at least for myself, haven't had that in mind. But
Okay. So then, but I suppose you built all this in Java, and then you were able to leverage this to build it in Clojure. And then, if I look here, you really got into Clojure and became an organizer for Clojure North in Toronto. So could you talk a little bit about that and why you started to do that?
yeah. Um, so let me think. That's like a long time period
Yeah.
happened, but yeah, I really got into Clojure. The Clojure community in Toronto is absolutely amazing, and I think even uh, globally, it's a super friendly and inclusive community. So I really wanted to help and get involved. The more and more I was involved. So at some point, I think we were talking during the meetups. We have them once a month. They're still going around, even though I'm not in Toronto. I would recommend anyone that's listening that is to go and attend. Um, and we just started talking. Hey, like there's all these events going on around the world, and man, I always want to go to one of these conferences, but traveling's like difficult, or some people didn't have the means, some people didn't like to travel, so we started saying, why don't we host one here? Like, we have people that are really passionate about organizing events. Some of us have organized workshops before. Closure Bridge was also, we had a Closure Bridge Toronto. So we had some experience, not a lot. And I think we definitely underestimated the difficulty of running a conference.
Yeah.
But it was enough to get us excited and say, okay, let's do this thing. And then I really kickstarted that, set up, the nonprofit for it, did all the paperwork, and that was really awesome. I really enjoyed doing that. Uh, the conference for, I think it was 2 years that we ran it.
Right, right. And you ran it for 2 years, and then did anyone else take over, or is it sort of in hiatus?
I think it's in hiatus at the moment. It's possible that it will come back in the future, but I'm not involved because I don't live in Toronto anymore.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about what it was like to have sort of a context in business and then move into the dev space, and just talk about the, sort of what your perspectives were with the conversations you were having sort of with your peers, and what was it like to, I would hope, sort of understand both sides and still be able to communicate some of the concerns.
Mm, right. In I don't think I appreciate the value of a business education and background in tech until having gone through many years of being in tech. Uh, because nowadays I find that the ability to communicate within your team on a technical level is important, but what's arguably just as important is communicating with people outside of your team and in other parts of the company that aren't technical, and being able to understand what they're saying, but also translate technical concepts to them in a way that's meaningful and important to them. That shows the value that your team is doing. That shows the value that you guys are offering the company.
Right,
And that I think a lot of us in tech struggle with that. And like I often get super into the details of things, but the business background kind of keeps me grounded in that side of it. Like I realize that for everything that we're doing, there has to be some sort of monetary aspect to it because that's the way the world works. And you need to hire people and pay them, so you need to justify why are they there and what's the value that they're bringing to the company. So I think that that aspect is super valuable. But starting out, I didn't feel that way. I was, I would say, a deer in the headlights in some regards. Like people would say certain terms and phrases and words, and I had no idea what the heck it meant.
on what
Um,
side?
on the technical side, like there were so many things that, especially as a self-taught programmer, when you don't go to a computer science program, you don't pick up these things as part of like a course. You would have to consciously find a way to do that. And when some coworkers might say certain terms, you'd be like, I have no idea what that means. Um, and it at first it's you might feel like embarrassment or a bit of shame. I definitely did. You're, like a feeling, oh, I don't belong here. Uh, I think that the thing, for me at least, what pushed me to get beyond that was just asking, like, uh, and I do it now to this day, especially like even if I don't understand something, I'm not shameful of like, I'm sorry, like I don't know what that means. Tell me, tell me what recursion means, or I don't know. Like, tell me about linked lists. I want to understand more. That sounds super cool. Like, it doesn't have to be. Uh, you don't even have to say it in like, oh, I don't know this. I'm so bad. You could phrase it in such a way that shows that you're interested in the topic, and that you know that they have a lot of knowledge, and you want to hear more about it from them. And
Right.
that's a great way of learning these things. I found when I was starting, and even to this day.
Did you find that you had pretty supportive coworkers when you were having these sort of inquiries?
Yes, and yeah, I mean, I think my coworkers were, yes. but I didn't have a lot of experienced coworkers around at the time. I started work at a
Right.
very small company, so there was someone there who did a lot of coding for um, internally for like tooling, and then there was another team outside that the company outsourced software development to, and they had lots of knowledge, but weren't very good at communicating it. So it like it, I wouldn't say that it was necessarily the easiest environment, but I think any environment you can get that kind of information, of course, from your coworkers. But of course, I think you need to, especially if you're starting by yourself, you need to push yourself to learn these things outside of work.
Right.
For me, I remember at some point I joined a reading group in Toronto that was going through the structure and interpretation of computer programs. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
SIGP is
STIC.
what it's called. Yeah.
SITC
Uh,
or something.
SIGP, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Something. Yeah. Sick P. Yeah.
super solid. I don't think
Yeah.
I
It's
ever
good.
finished the book, but going through those problems taught me a lot of these fundamentals in computer science that I think
All
you would
right.
learn at a undergraduate program. So that's just an example, but doing things like that also outside of work helps. Um, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. There's actually a follow up to that book that
Oh, yeah.
that's pretty good. And yeah, I was working somewhere and someone, ordered it, and I was like, oh, I didn't know there was a follow up to that book, so I thought that was cool. So was this all at Synchronous? Is this where you first started your career?
Yep. Yeah. So I think when I joined Synchronous, it was a very small company. It was
Right,
three of us full time working there, and then it grew to I think it was well over 20 when I left.
right,
So there was like a period of growth for the company. Um, a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were taking the tech that we first outsourced to other developers and bringing it in house and growing that, helping automate the process, giving more power um, to the team to do what they're doing best, which is in the case of
yeah,
Synchronous consulting. So it was a market or is a market research company, and like taking or giving the researchers the ability to do their jobs more efficiently and find deeper insights using the tools that we had was I think what pushed the company to grow over those years.
Did you, as you like sort of move forward with your career, what did you think that the people on the sort of project management side or business side, what did you feel like they kind of missed about people who were on the engineering side, where there could be a miscommunication that occurs kind of frequently?
Right. Yeah. Um, I I remember the biggest one was uh, at least I think in the last 2 or 3 years of my time at Synchronous when I was the VP of tech there, justifying why why my team exists, like what value we're bringing, because you have all of these tools and systems in place that we've built over the years. It was like a full from start to finish in the market research sphere. Collect surveys, analyze data, spit out reports, like everything in between. So there was a
Hmm.
lot there, and at some point it started being like, okay, so all of these things already exist. Like, why do we need so many people? Why do we need to maintain tools? Like, what's the ROI on that? So justifying the dollar amount of having the people for that, uh, and I think that's a difficult thing at first, especially if like things are working. But then also if things are not working, you have to justify why they're broken.
All
So
right.
it's a difficult act at companies that aren't tech focused. And I think since I've so it's been maybe 2 years or 3 years since 2 years since I've been at Synchronous, but their mindset has also started shifting in the time since, and they've now split up into a bit of a tech company and the market research company. So it's two instead of one. But
Well,
yeah,
that's an interesting thing because so sort of if you have something that you built or anything, if you have a car, you got to maintain it. If you got whatever it is that there are other things that people purchase that they have to maintain. So what makes this such a hard thing for uh, sort of this other side to understand? Is it an operations cost optimization where they're trying to slice, or are there other things there that that may not be obvious that make it a little bit tougher for them uh, to see the justification of the cost, or for people on the tech side to see why they would want to push in this direction?
right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point. It's like you maintain a lot of things in your everyday life that you purchase, but I think the car analogy is a great one because sometimes it's difficult for, especially if you have people in their 40s or 50s on from the business side who worked at corporate jobs all their lives, to understand that um, technology is kind of like that too. Dependencies become outdated. Your systems might get vulnerable. You need to maintain that. Also, the processes of the company change. The people who I worked with at the company um, changed the way that they did things. The projects that the company did became increasingly more complex and um, very interesting, but like in a way that outgrew the tooling that we originally built. So there needed to be changes to their processes. But explaining all of that always takes some time and patience. And eventually, I think people do understand. At least the people I worked with were fantastic, and they had um, on the business side too. I mean, like they could see logic and follow through that. Okay, this does help us and help the bottom line in the end. But it's I think a bit of a balancing act between how do you do that and also satisfy the developers being like, yeah, but of course, like this is obvious. We need
Yeah,
to deal with technical debt. Duh.
you're right.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you, so how did you feel your role changed as you sort of moved into different spaces? So you were very much hands-on, and then over time you were just sort of overseeing. And where do you see that your sort of the distribution of your role changed, and how did that sort of affect you? And how did you adjust to that over time? Because it was a small company, so you would, no matter what the adjustment, it would, I would assume, have to be really quick, and you have very little time to onboard yourself from a knowledge perspective and from doing the work time perspective. So there was a rate of change there you had to really cope with. So, that's one side. And the other side is sort of how did do you feel like what you did before, so that non-tech field where it was able to help you do that faster, or at least give you the edge where they give you a little less work to do?
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're very correct. My role has shifted a lot over the years, um, and it's a bit strange to reflect on it. It almost like I don't think it dawned on me until you've mentioned it because it all felt very natural in a way. Uh, it m- there were a lot of at a small company you have to do a lot of different tasks and often things that you don't want to do, that are not in your job description and you don't expect to do, but we have to get things done and exist. So that's what you do. And I think the the business education helped with that because there's um, it kind of gave you like a rationale as to why you're doing the thing you're doing. Like you realize, okay, I'm going through an Excel spreadsheet. I'm checking numbers for analysts for some report that needs to go to a client. I'm doing that because there's four other people here, and that client is paying half of our salaries. There's good reasons for the things that you're doing that uh, uh, especially when you have like the bigger picture in mind, you can kind of rationalize and justify for. But I think the role changing is super interesting too, because going to be more of a manager and a lead and doing things like interviewing new hires, interviewing students. We took co-op students, so I think for anyone outside of North America, that's like the equivalent of apprentices or interns who are still studying, coming and working at your company for a short period of time. In the case of Synchronous, we had co-ops for 4 to 8 months, and that there, I think having the I learned all of this on my own kind of thing, plus the business background helped because all of these guys were learning Clojure for the first time. And they might have some background from school. That I think really helped. But most of them had to figure out this language for the first time themselves. And I guess with the help of me and the rest of the team. But
Right.
the background of learning it yourself really helped there.
Right.
Um, Yeah, and anyways, I think
Yeah.
I've gone a bit off track of your original question, but yeah, uh, that that I think was a fun time. I really enjoyed
Right.
the changes and even the changes up to my role nowadays.
No, and I think it does make sense because all the people that you were bringing in were also learning and changing. So there's sort of like an expectation to learn and change. So for you, it became quite natural. So you just took that mentality with you to all the other levels, and you had enough background on both sides, enough to give you a foundation to keep rotating forward, and it sort of speaks to what it's like to be in a culture that allows you and sort of justifies change and encourages change. It becomes natural, and that's what a lot of people really want in their companies anyway, so that they can change the market conditions. So it just speaks to the value of that kind of culture and culture in general, and how it can affect people who work in those companies. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
think well, everyone wants to learn and grow. I think that's almost like a human drive. We want many things like beyond the shelter and food and water we need to live. Uh,
Right.
Learning is one of them.
Right. So moving back a little bit to the tech side, I want to talk a little bit about Kit and why you did it and what it is.
Yep. Uh, so Kit is a web framework that uh, Dimitri and I started on, I think, in 2021. So the origins of it come from the Luminous framework, which Dimitri built a long time ago and was like de facto the most known, I think, web framework for Clojure. Uh, I remember I like one day at my new role here at Deep Impact in Switzerland. I started working on a new project, and as I would always do, I would spin up a Luminous project as the template. But after the day ended, I realized I replaced almost everything in the template with something new, and my way of working had changed so much, and also the Clojure community evolved so much from what Luminous built on. There were like many things that were still the same, and lots of the libraries that Luminous provided, I was still using, but in just very different ways. So that kind of led me to start thinking, oh, okay, this is something that I can adapt and maybe make my own template for my own personal use. And that's
Right.
kind of how Kit started. So I had a bunch of backend libraries that played well with Integrant, which is the backing for Kit, and I was quite happy with it. I thought, oh, this is cool. And I think it was on a call one day, Dimitri and I were talking, and I told him offhand almost of this thing. He said, "Oh, that's really." I was thinking of like redoing Luminous or something. We should work together on this. And that got us really excited because that led to some of the other ideas that are still works in progress, I think, but really cool things like code generation and the way that we have the templating to make it also work with like modern closure tooling. So there were like
Right.
a lot of things that got us both excited, and that really gave us the push to refine it and get the documentation ready, like get it at a place where at least other developers can work with it, like build some examples and things like that.
Right.
Uh, so that's the origins of it.
Right.
And now it's been out in the wild for I think about a year or maybe less. I forget now. It's been some time,
A
and
year.
I'm really
I think you
happy.
finished end of 2021, right?
Yeah, so it must be then about a year or so. Okay,
About a year.
Ti-
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
time
that.
flies.
Yeah, time does fly. Okay. How are you feeling about it now?
I love the community response. I love that there are people contributing to it on a regular basis, asking questions, creating PRs, adding modules, things like that.
Right.
It's awesome seeing it grow. I also love it because I use it at work. So for
Right.
us at Deep Impact, it's really important because it's the basis of a lot of our web services, and helps us like make sure that they run stably and can scale horizontally and do nice things like surviving DOS attacks.
Right. Do you guys use ClojureScript on the front end?
No, so we mainly use TypeScript and React on the front end. Uh,
TypeScript and
that's
React on
why
the front end?
that's why
Okay.
I think this is maybe, in my opinion, one of the improvements we could have with Kit. We have a Clojure script module which like generates the front end side of things, but by default, it's not really part of the template because at least at the time, I was really focused on backend development and
Right.
the
Right.
stability of like how do you scale the backend and how do you do it efficiently.
Right.
So that's one part that I think we could improve on and make a lot friendlier for ClojureScript developers.
Are you one of the million people that has tried OpenAI and sort of that new wave? Have you seen anything in that space?
In Chat GPT, you mean, or
In ChatGPT specifically, yeah.
yeah, it's I mean it's funny you're bringing it up. I think it was on Thursday. A friend of mine from Toronto messaged me, and he was absolutely like over the moon about this thing. And I don't know. I was kind of skeptical. I thought, oh, maybe this is just hype. It's just another chatbot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not like too into some of the things that have come out of the tech world in the past couple of years, so I was like a little bit reserved. Uh, but then I started using it on Thursday. I just started asking some basic things like, "Here's some text I want to send a client. Can you make it less technical?" And it gives you
Right.
almost like 95% perfect thing that you should send in an email.
Right.
I was super impressed, and then like you can even start refining it. You can ask, okay, make it shorter, make it less formal, or make it more formal, or whatever. Or even to generate code, it did. It's not always working code, but it's like a start.
Right.
And it's like the first time I think in a long time that I've been super excited about a new piece of tech. I don't know yet what we can all do with it. It almost feels
Right.
like we're on the cusp of something new, and we're all trying to figure out where does this lead? Like, what do we do with this new
Right.
technology? But
Right.
it's genuinely impressive.
I think it's always interesting. I always thought of Clojure as something that made meta programming easier, and then we have ChatGPT that is sort of making meta programming easier. So I'm
Yeah,
always wondering to myself, how do we get Clojure into that space in a way, right? Because Clojure is built on the idea that it can really do that. Like the whole structure of that language is very suitable to reconstructing itself and sort of improving on itself. So I just thought that was interesting. Now that this has come out, maybe the values that Clojure sort of proposes won't be as foreign to the market as it was before.
yeah, and I mean, I think lots of features that we've seen in functional programming and Clojure specifically end up in the mainstream or have ended up already in the mainstream in past uh, well, since I started working with it. So like we have lots of new functional features in Java now, in JavaScript
In
also,
C++,
and I think yeah, yeah,
even.
also and
Yeah,
C sharp, which is Java also essentially on .NET.
essentially.
Uh,
Yeah.
so it's and I mean, yeah. Also, I think we talked at one point about like React and things like Reframe was Redux before Redux existed, and then
Right,
some of the things that React's now doing is essentially like a reagent atom. So
right, exactly.
it's cool.
Well, you know what? Thank you so much for being on the program and like trying to talk to us about some of the things that you're doing. Uh, it'd be great if you could tell us where we can reach you, where we can find you, and some of the things that you're interested in doing aside from Kit.
Yeah, totally. You can find me on GitHub. Just search, I guess, for the Kit framework, or I don't know. Do I give you my GitHub URL?
If that's what, if you feel comfortable, you know, it is
Yeah,
open and
sure.
it is easy to find. So
Yeah, I mean,
you're just making it only slightly easier.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So you can find me there. Um, yeah, Dimitri and I have some plans for Kit. We've been talking about it recently, and I'm not going to announce any of them yet. But next year, I think we're going to push for some new features and development there.
All right.
And outside of that, genuinely, this chat gpt thing has me over the moon, so I'm really trying to think of what do I want to do with this, and maybe I'll start playing around with that space as well.
Well, thank you very much for being on. Thanks for taking the time. This is Nick Perrick, and enjoy your winter.
Yeah, thanks. You as well. Take care.
Thank you.